class. This is Pavan. This is my attempt at recording a video about a few patches which I wanted to talk to you about. The first one will be about the sound patches, which we have uploaded on Canvas since the beginning of the semester. We will go through some of these patches which we haven't covered, which may be helpful for you in developing projects. We will start with simple sinusoids, simple noise filters, synthesis with concepts like amplitude modulation, and of course, MIDI notes and K-sliders are things that you may already have been doing. So sound, okay, the first thing is a K-slider, which is, an object that looks like this. Pretty much looks like a keyboard. And the way this patch is set up, which is on Canvas for you, is it's generating random notes on a scale of 0 to 127, which is about the number of keys you have on the keyboard. And of course, there is the option of just clicking a few keys to see what these numbers are. In fact, this keyboard goes to less than 127, but things get saturated after that. So there's a few things going on here. One is being able to output an integer or input an integer value that maps to one of the MIDI notes. And the other is to actually convert the output of a MIDI note to sound through this object make note. When I first introduced this 2 months ago, roughly in the beginning of the class, yes, I forgot the make note part, and I was trying to get the notes to play without having that object written up. And if you look at this big display, this is a multi-slider, and this is a very handy display tool for debugging all manner of things, all manner of signal flows. What this display is doing right now at this time is displaying the sequences of numbers that are coming out as a dot. On the x-axis is time, and on the y-axis is the value. So this is randomly jumping between 0 and 127, and the dot is randomly jumping also all over the y-axis, but there is really only one dot per time. It may be looking like a two-dimensional scatter plot, but this is really not a scatter plot. This is one value per time, but because it's jumping around so much, it just looks like a scatter plot. Again, a very useful, handy tool for just visualizing signals, and if there are problems in signal flows, very easy to spot it with multi-slider. So this is one of the easy sound patches that you can use to convert data streams to sounds. You already know how to scale values from fractional things like how our motion capture system is set up to big values like 0 to 127 using the scale object or the ZMAP object. And in combination with things like quadrants, combination with things like distances and so on and so forth, you can have a variety of mapping strategies to sound just through this. The next object I have is sinusoids, plain sinusoids. Again, this is something we may have introduced earlier. This introduces to you an object called cycle tilde, which is a plain sinusoid generator. It is always interesting to hear what a pure sinusoid sounds like, and I'll create maybe a 150 hertz sinusoid. Hopefully you can hear it, and it sustains. So the thing with cycle tilde is once you set a frequency, it keeps outputting that frequency constantly, so it gets very monotonous to hear. But assuming that this value is modulated by movement, so we are going to pretend that this number is coming from some movement based mapping. It goes back and forth. What happens is right now I'm using my touchpad to modulate this number, so things still feel a lot smoother to hear. With motion capture, the data can be pretty noisy, so it can create a jarring effect in reality. So you see those beeps and boops, it's really nothing but the frequency making a very abrupt jump, which is perceived as a sudden high frequency. But again, this is one of those tools which is a building block, which is a stepping stone into other things. Now, this is interesting. That's a history meter, which I have not seen before. Fascinating. And again, a very quick debugging tool to see testing signal flows, testing the perceptual quality of some simple mapping strategies, and so on and so forth. The next patch is filtered noise, which is something I like. It uses a few basic signal processing concepts to convert sinusoids into slightly nicer quality sounds using filtering. Now, what is filtering? The idea behind this patch is that most sounds that we hear in through musical instruments, through speech, through any physical process that generates sound, including, let's say, knocking on this table, are not pure tones. They consist any rich sound, any rich, uh, you know, uh, textured sound has a few frequencies present all the time. Is it very specific choices periodically placed out on the frequency axis, or is it just a clump of frequencies around a single peak? Those things change how the sound, feels. This is emulating. This patch emulates some of the processes that happen in wind instruments, which is you take a flute, you take a didgeridoo, you take any of these, or even not just wind instruments, even stringed instruments, wherever there is resonance involved, which is you create a disturbance through either through blowing blowing air into an instrument, or through plucking a string. But then there is the resonator, which amplifies certain frequencies or suppresses certain frequencies, and the output is never a pure tone, nor is it just pure noise, but it's amplifying certain areas, reducing certain other areas, so it creates a rich, textured, sound. And there is a word I'm looking for, which I'm missing. Music enthusiasts use that all the time. What is that word? Anyway. uh, okay, so how does this patch work? At the core of it is just like in the MIDI node generator, we were using a random object which spits out an integer, a discrete number, once every few milliseconds, depending upon how you program the metro object that drives it. This is a noise tilde object, which means it outputs a noise signal. It doesn't output a single number. The output is a signal which is formatted as a time series of floating point numbers. So let's start by hearing first how noise appears to the ear. And I would like to shrink this. I'm going to directly connect up this to the noise. Okay, so pretty jarring, right? It's pretty jarring. And what I'm passing the noise through is a resonant filter, which is RESON tilde, with a few variables, and you can look up the help files to understand what these things mean. The first number, 300, represents the center frequency. 300 hertz is the frequency around which you are preserving the signal information, and other signals are being suppressed. And this object is a scope. It's a frequency plot of the input signal, and wherever you see this peak is where the resonant centering is. Okay, this is called a spectroscope. which gives you a spectral plot, which means it converts the input signal into a frequency, version. And wherever you see the high peaks is where the most energy of the signal is after this filtering is done. Again, it is worthwhile to connect up the spectroscope directly to the noise signal to see how that looks. As you can see, for a noise signal, the energy of the signal is fairly spread out across all frequencies, and that's why it's sometimes called white noise, because the color white in vision has a similar analog, meaning we have, even in color, we associate colors with wavelengths and frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, which is just light in that case. So every color has a frequency associated under it, and here every sound has a frequency associated with it. And in the case of white color, we say white color emerges when you mix all these colors in certain wavelengths, which go all the way from violet all the way to red, right? The rainbow of colors. When you mix them all in roughly equal proportions, when you mix these frequencies in roughly equal proportions, what you get is white color. So that terminology carries over to noise. Sound also has these frequencies, and we have audible range of frequencies, 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, 200 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And if you mix all of these frequencies in roughly equal proportion, the sound that results sounds like white noise. And this is the frequency breakup. Most of these frequencies are roughly equally represented. But now, after my resonant filter, not all frequencies are equally represented. Certain frequencies are more represented than others. So that's the whole point of resonance. And then this is an object that takes in values that you can control, that you can modulate again. So the centering of this frequency can go back and forth. Okay, so see the peak shifts back and forth. And as it shifts, the quality of the sound keeps changing. Okay, the word I was looking for was timbre. Okay, maybe this is timbre. The rich textured sounds that you're hearing are a function of the resonant frequency. It is also a function of this roll off, how quickly it's rolling off. The sharper the roll off is, the more sinusoidal the sound gets. The slightly broader the roll off is, the more timbre the sound gets. So we can try and experiment with this second number, which is it's called the Q factor, and it controls the roll off of that filter. So I'm just going to connect this to the second number to control the roll off, and let's see what happens. Okay, so the higher it gets, the sharper the roll off gets, and even that you can modulate with movement, if you will. And while it keeps the center frequency the same, the cutoffs and the roll-offs are a little slower, and you get a slightly different quality of the sound. Okay, so this is a very simple demonstration of very simple signal processing concepts, including, representing sound in terms of its underlying frequencies, filtering underlying frequencies, controlling roll-off factors for the frequency filter, for the resonant filter, and controlling the centering frequency of the resonant filter. Okay, cool. So this is an interesting patch, which is good, I feel. The fourth patch that I'd like to talk about was built by one of my TAs for a graduate class, Garrett Leroy Johnson. Some of you may know him. This is a patch that is in the realm of techniques, which in the media arts side, people call these things additive synthesis. From an engineering background, when I saw these techniques, these reminded me of what is known as amplitude modulation in radio communications. Now, the radio in your car, when you use FM and AM, they actually use similar concepts, but at extremely high frequencies that you can't hear, but things that your radio can pick up. the ideas are the same, which is AM stands for modulating the amplitude, which means that the shape of the envelope of a signal through some techniques. FM stands for frequency modulation, meaning you modulate the frequency, the zero crossings of the signal through some external techniques. This is a demonstration of what I would refer to as amplitude modulation. So there's two key things here. One is an input basic wave shape that is always going to be playing. Let's start with a sinusoid because we sort of understand how sinusoids look and sound to the ear. In the first patch, in the second patch, when we just played pure tones, you heard what that sinusoid sounded like, a monotone single tone, right? In addition to that sustained tone, in this patch, you have an enveloping function, which is right here. Now, this object, which lets you set this envelope, is called a function object, very useful. This function object, this envelope, is going to multiply this sinusoid that you're hearing. So sinusoids go up and down, periodic, and then when you multiply an enveloping function to that sinusoid with the right kind of frequencies, so the frequency of the sinusoid is much higher than the envelope. Envelope is changing slowly. So when you multiply a fast changing sinusoid with a slow changing envelope like this, you will hear it as a tone that is rising and falling in volume. So this is volume control. So this envelope is volume control, automatic programmed volume control of a sinusoid. So instead of hearing bing, you will hear bing. And then this is set on repeat. So there is a metro. This is not gonna just play once. The sinusoid keeps playing all the time, and this envelope will keep repeating. So you'll hear bing, bing, bing. Okay, so this is enveloping on repeat. So let's hear it. Okay, volume is low. Okay, the frequency of the sinusoid is too low. So let's set it to maybe 500. Here's the frequency of the sinusoid. Okay. So I'm going to reduce it. Now the thing with this patch is, again, there's many things that you can program and control and modulate. One is control and modulate the frequency of the underlying sinusoid itself. So as you go up and down. So what you're hearing is changing frequency, but the enveloping at any of these frequencies is similar. So even if I set it at a higher frequency, the enveloping is creating the same effect. Bow, bow, bow. Okay, and that quality of that enveloping is being decided by this object here, which is also programmable. So if I take this peak, if I take this point and I drag it up there, you're going to hear a different enveloping. You're going to hear wow, wow. Okay, so let's hear that. And then bring this down. Oops. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so do you hear that? So now the rise is slower. And you can add more points by simply clicking on it, and you can delete points by a shift click. So I want to delete this point. This got added by mistake, so delete the shift click. But now I want to create a weird M shape. Remember those experiments we did? Okay, I need to mute this for a second. So remember those experiments we did with sit to stand, punching, and those kinds of ballistic movements. And we said that for most of these ballistic movements, the speed of the hand in the case of a punch, or the speed of the head in the case of you getting up from a chair, seems to follow, if it's very efficient, it seems to follow a bell-shaped curve. If it's not very efficient, you will see a M shape. So this is a tool which you can use directly to try and sonify those kinds of sounds and movements, and you can experiment with a lot of things. Let's try and create an M-shaped envelope to hear what that inefficient way of standing might look like, might sound like. So I'm gonna create an M shape here. Okay, and here is my M shape. And this won't feel very good because it's too few points on the envelope, but we can smooth it out. I can add a few more points along the way to smooth things out a little bit. So maybe like this, and one more here and here. And I can move this envelope a little to the right. Okay, more smooth and gentle undulations of the envelope always helps in making a more pleasing sound. Okay, so that's my M-shaped envelope, and let's play this now. Let's get the sound running. So I hope you can hear that double peak, okay? Again, you can have different frequency control, you can have different envelope control, so all of it's programmable. You can use different underlying wave types itself. Sinusoid is easy to interpret. Some of these other waveforms are more difficult to interpret, but the concept is the same. You will have, in this case, this triangular shape playing at the base level at a high frequency, and then that envelope is modulating this underlying frequency, this underlying wave shape, okay? And this is pulse forms, different kind of triangle, and this is like a randomized thing. So the last one is pretty close to what we were playing in the noise tilde option, white noise with amplitude modulation. All right, so those are the sound patches, and this video is about sound. Hopefully you found a few things here that you can play with as part of your projects, and feel free to read through the reference files and the help files for all these objects. You will find a variety of ways in which you can use them. And then the next video will be about video. So video processing, and there might be a few of those in that module. Okay, so thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we shall see how the quality is once I post. Thank you. Okay, how do I stop screen recording? Okay, audio patches.